The stadium was silent, so silent it felt like the world itself had paused to breathe, because something was wrong with Shohei Ohtani. Not the kind of wrong you see in injuries or slumps, but the kind of wrong that happens when a legend pushes himself beyond the edge that even legends fear to touch. Everyone thought he was invincible. Everyone believed he had already conquered every frontier the sport could offer. But tonight, something darker hung in the air, something uncertain, something electric, something that whispered that even the strongest among us can carry storms no one else sees. Even before he stepped into the box, you could feel the tension. Ohtani wasn't smiling. He wasn't relaxed. He wasn't the calm, composed superstar whose confidence always felt contagious. No, he looked like a man staring down an invisible threat. Reporters had been talking for days. Fans had been whispering. Analysts had been dissecting every second of his last few games. And it all came from one phrase he'd repeated over and over. Nothing can stop me. Some said it was confidence. Some said it was motivation. But others said it was a warning. Because when a man pushes himself so hard, when a player refuses to acknowledge limits, when a superstar tries to become more than human just to meet the expectations placed on his shoulders, that's when disaster quietly sharpens its claws. He dug his cleats into the dirt. The pitcher stared in. The crowd leaned forward like a single living creature. Then, a deep breath, a heavy exhale, and a tiny moment of hesitation that only the most attentive eyes could see. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was something else, something no one could name. The pitch came blazing in. Ohtani swung, and the crack of the bat echoed like thunder rolling across a battlefield. The ball soared. The fans erupted. But Shohei didn't watch it fly. He winced, just slightly. A tiny grimace that vanished before the cameras could fully capture it. A red flag in a sea of cheering voices. The ball landed in the second deck. But the celebration felt muted. Not because the crowd wasn't loud, they were deafening. But because Ohtani himself didn't look like a man who'd just hit a monster home run. He looked like a man questioning something deeper. As he rounded first, he touched his side. As he rounded second, he slowed just a fraction. And by the time he crossed home, he looked more tired than triumphant. It wasn't physical exhaustion. It was something heavier. Expectation. Pressure. A kind of emotional weight that even the strongest athletes eventually have to confront. He sat on the bench, staring ahead, not talking, not laughing. His teammates glanced over with concern. The trainers approached but didn't want to intrude. And in that quiet, the whispers grew louder. Is he pushing too hard? Is he hiding something? Is nothing can stop me actually a cry for help? Because greatness has a cost. Because heroes bleed in silence. Because the world never stops demanding more. Shohei had become the symbol of perfection. A global icon. A miracle in cleats. A once-in-a-century talent who made the impossible look routine. But nobody, not even him, can outrun the human limits forever. As the camera zoomed in, you could see it in his eyes. The exhaustion, the determination, the pain, the refusal to quit. He wasn't just battling opponents. He was battling expectations, battling pressure, battling the image the world had forced him to carry. People call him the strongest, the most talented, the most unstoppable, but sometimes, the strongest crumble silently. Sometimes the unstoppable force becomes the one thing that needs rest the most. And sometimes the phrase, nothing can stop me, is the very thing that pushes a person toward breaking. Yet, there was something else in those eyes too. A spark, a fire, a stubborn refusal to surrender to the weight pressing down on him. Because this wasn't the end. Not for him, not for a man who had rewritten what baseball thought was possible. He stood up from the bench, rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and marched right back toward the on-deck circle like a man choosing to fight the storm instead of hide from it. In that moment, the fear faded. The doubt washed away. The concerns, the rumors, the speculation. None of it mattered. Because even when he's exhausted, even when he's hurting, even when the world expects perfection, Shohei Ohtani chooses courage. He chooses resilience. He chooses to rise when it would be easier to fall. And that, more than the home runs, more than the speed, more than the pitches, more than the records, is why he's truly the strongest. Not because nothing can stop him, but because when something tries to stop him, he refuses to let it. And maybe that's the lesson we all needed. Not just fans, not just athletes, but anyone who's ever carried the weight of expectations, responsibility, or silent pressure. Strength isn't the absence of weakness. Strength is facing weakness and walking forward anyway. Shohei Ohtani isn't just a superstar. He's a reminder, a symbol, a living story of resilience. And as long as he keeps standing, as long as he keeps fighting, as long as he keeps choosing courage, the world will keep watching. The world will keep believing. And the world will keep learning from the quiet power of a man who refuses to break. Because in the end, the strongest isn't the one who feels nothing. It's the one who feels everything. And still steps back onto the field anyway.